Good. So recording, looks like recording started. So yeah, I guess we can
Perfect.
get going.
So hi everyone, welcome to the second special interest group docs meeting. This is the agenda for today. We haven't done the meeting for a while, like for a month and a week, I think. And I think it's good to have some updates first and know which is the current state, know possible topics or guides where people can work on or collaborate. And then we will have a more open discussion where we have some topics to discuss as well. So let's start. Well, during our last meeting, we set some call to actions. And this table, we will have it in each meeting to see if we have accomplished them or we have to talk again in order to keep track and we don't lose what we have said in the meeting before. So basically, what we said was to add some kind of page or notes on GitHub where the community could share the blog posts they do. There is a lot of content being created in blogs, especially around the Japanese community. And right now we are not giving no visibility, and it's difficult to get track of them, and it could be useful to other people. It's not only about the documentation we are creating here. So the fact is that we didn't take any action right now. I have been evaluating some alternatives, but I would like also to hear or to do a call to research for more alternatives to see where we can put this documentation, and this would be tweeted later. Also, we say that we have to improve the internationalization of the documentation. So we have enabled a tool that will make the translation process much easier and will allow different parties to contribute. Then also we talk about making a request for guides or documentation that has to be done visible. So we updated guides required, documentation required on GitHub. And if also make visible the request for translating a guide. We have changed a little bit the layout to make it easier to edit on GitHub. But in that regard, we didn't do anything else. So here it's a check mark, but maybe it's a question mark. Now I read it again. So this is what we have talked in the last meeting that we were going to do. I don't know if there is any questions, but if not, we will talk a little bit in depth some of the points later. So it's not something to go really in deep right now. Hi, Jeff. So let's go to the next slide, where we are going to talk about the current state of the documentation and priorities. The current state, it's important to say that right now, at this current moment, the documentation, if you try to run, for example, the guides, they won't work because the Nem2 SDK has been updated and the latest version of the documentation is not fully matched into master. Here we have the issue with all the changes. There are a lot of changes applied already. 93 files, but we have an issue with the Nem2 CLI that doesn't allow us to merge the guides because it will continue failing as there is an error with the SDK that doesn't allow us to update the Nem2 CLI. So we will wait until this gets fixed. We have an estimated time of 2 days. I think we can wait a couple of days. And then we will merge this and the documentation, let's say, will be usable again. I don't know if you have some suggestions if something like this happens in the future. like how can we like ensure that the documentation still functional, if there is like an update in another layer. I don't know if someone could think about something, or if it's like a topic we can like point it as a call to action to discuss in the next meeting.
I added a discussion item at the end during the discussion time for this, that particularly just like multi-version support. So typically you'll see some projects that will basically, have, it either manifests as like a drop down or something, or maybe a list of links. And you'll have like, V1, V2, and then like latest, or even sometimes like experimental or future releases. So I think it's important, but not like, oh, we have to get this done like tomorrow. But as we're iterating, it allows kind of stable versions of the doc and product to exist alongside unstable ones. And there's people that, want stability and require it. And then there's people that don't, and they always want to be on the bleeding edge. So it allows us to kind of like stamp things as usable, but not stable or production ready. Or for instance, we had kind of discussed in the testing group meeting, the previous one, with idea that if we look at testing and documentation as kind of leading the way, we can basically say like, hey, even if stuff isn't fully kind of documented and tested, we can even call it out if we want. We can say like, hey, this feature is like in progress, and like it might work or it might not. This is kind of how you use it, but it's going to change, user beware. Yeah. And that can be in like, whether, I think some of that just comes down to a couple little tweaks in kind of a versioning scheme and using some sort of drop down, like auto on change, like relinking the user, combined with, just some branch strategy, right, in the repo. So yeah, those are kind of like some thoughts and questions.
I agree with you in that point, that in the future, maybe we should have like a drop down or something that enables you to change between versions. That is totally doable with Sphinx. But my concern is that, in my opinion, right now, we don't want like people to get stuck in the previous version. For example, now that, Cow has been released, we don't want actually people using Cow, Bison, for example, because it's not like a candidate release. So in order to force people to move to the next version as we are developing in this current moment, I think this would make like more sense once we have like the release candidate version. And from them we like can like do versioning and make these docs accessible, because actually people will be using them in a production environment, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't, I wouldn't say, I think as it matures, you'd say use in a production environment. I think it definitely just, to what you just described, it just comes down to like when someone hits the page, if they're not hitting a direct link, if they're just landing on the page, what's the default docs that are given to them? And I think given the current state of the project, like for instance, today, if I went on there, the current state of the project would just default to Cal, right? So in the next 48 or so hours, if I have my page loaded and then I wake up in 2 days and I refresh it, it should just load the Cal docs, and then there's like a drop down that would say, V0.2 or Bison or, whatever, right? And we're kind of in this incremental kind of early releases until we get to, quote unquote, what a V1 would be. And I think that we can do, so one thing that I was trying to emphasize, I kind of brought it up a little bit, I think maybe on the API group, and then definitely in some of the chats, I think where we're at now, and this is like for everything, this is for testing, docs, functionality. We don't want stuff to be terrible, but we also should not be demanding a level of perfection or completion. So for instance, for Cow readiness, Cow at the server level has been ready for quite some time. And now we've spent a couple months getting other things updated, which in and of itself is fine. But what would be nice going forward is the gap is not like that. The gap is, hey, while everyone would love to snap their fingers and have 100% API compatibility and everything's documented and tested perfect, the realities are that 100% of the people do not use 100% of the features.
Yeah.
So if we can say, well, the choices are to have everything 100% perfect and documented and have it out in 2 months, or have it 40% done and have it out in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I guarantee that pretty much everyone would say, like, yes, let's do the former, and then we can do incremental releases. And so I think, there's no like right or wrong. I think, we're kind of incrementally learning because, for instance, this is our first real, I guess you could call it, we just had our first dot release, right? So we dropped some core changes that effectively aren't visible to the end user, but it is an update. It's a rev on the images and the functionality that's happening under the covers. It doesn't change the APIs, it doesn't change the docs per se. And we're going to have at least one more dot release before Dragon. So anyway, so I think it's all good. And so, like, to your point, I think it seems like there's these logical breakpoints, such as in 2 days or so, that like, hey, this is the stable version that we want to push people on. So, for instance, like what I could vision is, okay, I wake up in 2 days, I refresh my screen. This, the current cow version is the latest. And then if we introduce versioning, we could almost have like bleeding edge or experimental version. And that's what's being updated and published live behind the scenes. So kind of like what we have now in that branch, or that kind of all those pull requests and commits, like we can keep that in a way before we merge into like master and tag with a release, but we can actually do builds off of that branch and publish as like bleeding edge and say, just, hey, by the way, everyone, this isn't the default docs, but if you want to test the latest, it's kind of like,
if you want to look it, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you see, people that do, I mean, this is something we haven't really done yet, but we can even move towards at some point. We need to get a little bit more stable, is, nightly builds, right? So you'll see that for projects like Chrome and Firefox where, hey, we got nightly builds and there's certain docs and usage that go along with it. And then it's kind of like asterisks, like user beware. So I think there are things that we can kind of, think about, and we don't have to like, get it perfect, but
so let's put like a call to action in order to review a little bit how this is done with Sphinx, for example, and see like if from now on, or we can like actually like recover the past documentation. Well, we can because it's in GitHub, but if we can like tag it in some way that we can like have these tags in order if someone wants to see it, but I will try to focus more like from now on because everything has changed like a little bit. And if people start like continue using Alpaca or Bison, that won't be like beneficial because they will have to migrate later. So
yeah, and I think some of that can also, I mean, definitely at this point, it's like, please do not use Alpaca. Most likely, please do not use Bison unless there's something that's going to take you some time for your add-on product solution to like port over to Cow. And I think we can kind of look at it to the points and the ideas you brought up about, having docs kind of be one of the gating factors for like releases. We can almost do the inverse, where when it comes to deprecation, we can do the inverse, right? So where we want docs and testing and a certain level of stability and documentation to lead the way of when something is kind of announced and released, we can say, hey, functionally, you should not be using this. This is not going to be supported. Therefore, it will be deprecated, and we should, just remove the docs. Like, obviously, it lives in some branch or some tag somewhere, but if you go to the site, you will not find it anymore. And we can do like a, deprecation announcements and then just remove it in a build.
Yeah, and remove it from but have it tagged. Well, right now we have like, let me check, where is it? For example, if I go here, we have here like the version number of the docs, and they can like download and build the documentation. That is not like the best thing to do, but there is some kind of versioning that maybe we can reuse. So in that point, we have something, maybe we have to improve it, but yeah. Okay, so let's continue with priorities. So when people usually ask like, what is like the next thing, or what can I work on? Right now I have like these following priorities like in my head to document. One would be like write the code guides regarding the SDK usage. So there are like quite some of them right now to do, but like not every guide is ready to be worked on. But if someone wants to like, well, I know that Kyle is working on this guide that would be usable in the SDK like quite soon. And also we have like the set account filters guide that it's already like ready to be worked on because the SDK has been updated like today. So this guide can also be written, but there are like other guides that right now are not like ready to be written fully, but it can be started. For example, to start writing the introduction, how it's going to be structured. So if anyone wants to like contribute writing guides, there are here like some of them. And every time like there is a new idea, it's updated. So you can like take a look of every guide. Also, the second thing that it's a priority is to document Dragon features. Some of them, I guess, that right now are not like fully defined or decided, but we have these issues here. This would be like also mirrored in the Nem2 docs, repository after this talk. And for example, if someone wants to start documenting Mosaic Levy support, maybe they can like start like reviewing how it works in this one, for example, levies. And then in this issue, directly ask questions about how it's going to work, what are the changes. So I think that the core devs will answer these questions here, or we should like get the specification first in order to finish the final docs, but we can have like some ideas first and then start from there to write the final docs. Finally, start writing the Catapult server reference. It's divided in some steps. So if someone wants to contribute here, just say, okay, I want to do this guide. I want to do the description of the package organization. I want to, I don't know, there are like a lot of things to work on. So this is another entry point where people can contribute a lot. Any questions?
One thing that we can kind of add, I had raised a to-do item for people to document themselves in the API meeting last week for SDK.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I know there's a page that kind of has some of those details, but out of date. So as those updates are incrementally going in, we can take maybe from those meeting notes and then merge into the docs page. Granted, things might change, but I think one big thing is kind of like who are people what org are they part of and what they're focused on as more people come in. Right now, the SDKs is probably like where that first big addition and surge is happening. And so anyways, it's something else that had popped up last week, but obviously it has some content in the docs already, so we can kind of like push the updates and the latest there as well.
Continuing with this, I think that maybe this part of the meeting should be shared with the SIG API. So the people who are writing SDKs know about these needs of having docs about the process of doing an SDK. So this is like the next topic we are going to treat right now. The fact is that we have a guide of how to start coding an SDK, but there are some sections that are missing. They don't have like the full content. So for example, these sections are how the cryptographic functions work and how the package is structured. So you see here that this section is incomplete. And also another section is how the transaction serialization is done at the SDK level. So, because it will change with cat buffers. So we will need, like, for example, if the person who is doing the Python SDK or the Java SDK has work on this, like to spend some minutes describing what he has done or she has done, that would be like really good for the documentation and the next people who comes. And it will be easier to create new SDKs for different languages that will appear. So this is like a call to action for the CKPI group, but also we have not only the documentation of how to write a new SDK, we have the documentation per SDK that we expect like to have when we use like a product, right? So there is also a guide here, but this is more or less complete what we are like looking for achieve, to have consistency between all the SDKs. That is to have like the README complete, the code well documented, and a reference like auto-generated from the code. For example, if we go here to references, we can see that we have, for example, for TypeScript, a reference generated for the SDK, when you can see like all the methods, all the different functions, and the description of them. So here you have them. And I would like right now, like, to the developer to choose the tool he or she is using to generate the reference, as every language has like the best tool to do it. So that would be like a requirement. And also every guide, that's like an optional requirement. This could be done as well by people from the SIG docs. Each guide, you go to a guide, let me see. Okay, each guide has like the different languages. So for this example, we only have TypeScript and JavaScript. But if the Java developer wants to test and see if the way he coded the SDK is possible to also run these guides, this is like another level of definition of completeness or done they can follow, in order to ensure that the SDK provides all the functionality that at least other SDKs are providing. So that's a good thing to have. It's not like a requirement right now, but it's something advisable. And also like having a change log if there is like an update or something to list on GitHub what has been changed. So if someone goes there, can see like what happened, and if he has to adapt something in order to make the SDK work, and as well which version is the SDK targeting. So more or less, this could be like all required for documenting an SDK. Is there any question or suggestions, improvements?
Yeah, it all seems really good. Yeah, I think this notion, we kind of brought it up in the testing group, and as well as the API group, that this notion of working towards in like an incremental fashion what a supported SDK means, and most of that can be driven or should be driven by a certain quality of, obviously you want the code to functionally be there, but a certain level of quality and standardization around docs and testing. So I think leading with docs and then testing are kind of two good bars to set. So maybe one thing we can also do is I mean, I don't know, you know, like what you just went through, almost have it as like a checklist or something that, you know, API developers can kind of maintain, whether we throw it in a doc or in some markdown file in a repo. And then everyone, it's tough, especially if only one developer is kind of doing the lion's share of the work, to tackle all of this themselves, you know, because it's like, hey, get the coding done, but then, hey, there's the docs and there's the examples and the guides. So almost like they can kind of post. It's like, hey, I still got these other, I still got 40% of the work to do that is non-coding related. Kind of like we just said with docs. Hey, here's some stuff of to-do items for docs. Anyone who's interested can kind of help. Same thing for SDK developers. Like they should be doing stuff themselves, but it's also like, hey, I can't do everything. And given timing, it'd be great if someone could, document these.
Yeah, these tasks are like really easy to get them shared. So even for people that it's starting and doesn't feel like to start coding an SDK, it's like a good chance in order to know a little bit more about the technology. And for example, guides, it's like you learn a lot, like writing them, how the SDK works and how NEM works. So it's like a really good entry point to start writing guides. And also, I totally agree with you that it's like a way of having this required, let's say, documentation, a good like standard or like goal to make an SDK official or to make an SDK supported, because it gives you like some let's say goals to do, and it's quite clear. So if you follow the guides, if you follow the testing proposed, then your SDK is supported, for example. So yeah, definitely.
And actually, one thing as you were talking made me think of is maybe one thing which we can do, again, we don't have to commit to it, but just idea-wise, maybe we can prescribe for SDK projects as we try to come up with some, baseline or guide or standard for like test suites, is we can possibly have a guide test suite. So where there might be like a verbose test suite to test like all stuff for an SDK, but then, hey, if you're going to support the guides, let's break out a separate one, which might be duplicative, of course, with testing, but it's at least one that can go on like a regular CI loop, like every commit or something. And while it might not catch 100%, striving towards that 100% mark of if you go to the guide and you use an example, it will work in the languages that are there. Again, not a requirement, but it's kind of like, maybe we can set that as a goal and see how realistic it is to get there.
Maybe we will raise like this proposal in the next SIG testing meeting in order to propose the group to reach some kind of guide about what is required in tested and have some guidelines as well, like describing briefly what unit tests are required, talking a little bit about the scenario so the developer, the person who is developing the SDK knows about them, and which percentage of coverage we want to achieve to make it like supported.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So let's go to the next topic, which is translating the NEM Developer Center. This is like a short topic. Basically, we have like added a tool that is free for open source projects that allows to manage translations. So right now, as you see, we have like Japanese like really translated. I would say like a project is, well, a language is ready to be published in the docs once it gets like a 60%, because there are like a lot of strings that are not translatable. Let's say, for example, if we are talking about well, there are some words that are the same in all the languages. For example, SDK. So the translator don't translate them, and there is like a part that is never covered. So since we have added the tool, we have like the Chinese language being translated, and it's almost 50%. So hopefully we will add it soon as well. And the process, I haven't like tried like a lot the tool yet, but for example, if I go here to Japanese, it's quite easy to translate. You go here, you press translate. This is the API document. And basically it goes to this website, this editor, where appears line by line. So here you have like, which is the original string, and down you can translate it. And when you finish, you go to the next one, and there is like a person assigned to review them. And if everything is okay, the person assigned gives the check mark, and it can be downloaded directly from the documentation. So persons or people that are not even coders, they can also participate by translating the documentation, which is a good thing. And here you can see the example with the same layout. We have here English, but if I click Japanese, the documentation loads again, and I can see the documentation in Japanese with the same layout, the same meaning, and this gives like a little bit more of quality to the project. Okay, so
Nice.
it seems we are going to get Chinese like being like almost finished or advanced by this week or next week. So this is like awesome. And also I think that the person, I didn't review it, who's contributing more to Chinese, it's Tylon right now. So the good of this process is that there is, yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it. I think it's Tylon or Tylon. But the good of this process is that a lot of people can actually translate the documentation. So I can go to one line, put it to review, so the other person doesn't have to write the same line. So as you see, there is like a lot of things to do. If we click here to Teams, we see that there are like 4 translators, for example, for Chinese. We have also 2 members for Japanese. The leading person like to make this possible was Yoshi. I don't know how to pronounce it. Sorry. It was Yoshi Yuki. So he like started doing the Japanese translation, and then for that reason we opt to create this system that allow more people, not only him, to contribute to the docs. But yeah, I think that definitely when we have Chinese, the next thing would be find some Chinese languages. So it's a tool that I like, and it's really easy to use. So perfect that we are having Chinese and more languages added soon. So from this topic, anyone wants to like comment something?
I have a question about the translation. So this is a really good thing going. I was just wondering how many lines are there? I mean, if someone new comes asking what do you think, how long it takes to translate everything? Of course, really depends on the language, but are there some advanced statistics?
Well, there are like so many lines to translate. There are like, not words, but lines. There are like more than 1,000. We can see it here. Well, there are like, yeah, I would say this is the number. I don't honestly know the exact time, but maybe as the Japanese language it was different because it has been updated from a long time. It started when the documentation was little and it has been growing. But for Chinese, for example, we can ask the translators, or we can actually see when the tool was installed, when these people join, and when the translation reached like the 60%. So we have like an accurate estimate. But I would say like this translation tool was enabled, let's say, I don't remember if it was 2 weeks ago, I think so. And right now it's almost 50%. So let's say like it could take 3 weeks, 4 weeks to translate the whole project right now.
Wow.
There is a problem with this tool. It's not like all perfect, that the documentation changes, right? It's not something that you finish doing. But for that reason, it's like important to be collaborative because some person, for example, could want to translate it all at the beginning, but they don't want to maintain it, so other people can take care of it. So it's better to have like different translators for each language because the documentation usually changes, and it's like the only problem I have seen, that if there is like a big change, there are a lot of translations that are not lost because you can like continue reading them, but have to be copy and paste to the new string.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that is just like with other parts of the project. We just kind of have to slow down a bit. So where people want to like rush to do as many things as possible. Hey, we should have X number of languages. It's kind of like, well, yes, we should. But there's also, X% of the docs are going to change in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So that's where a certain level of just communication and coordination is like, well, don't go and translate the docs next week because a whole new drop is coming. Or, hey, like these parts of the docs, if you're going to start here. They're mostly to very stable, but
very stable.
The guides are going to completely change because the SDK is changing, right? So it's like those are things. Part of it's just communication based, and then people just like raising questions and stuff, which is incrementally how we can kind of move forward.
This is the next major change, and guides will change a little bit in the next release as has changed the SDK. But also we have like use this occasion in order to improve a little bit the guide. So there will be strings like won't be translated. And yes, this is like the bad thing I was talking about. So I think it's a good idea to define more or less parts that are stable, that won't change in the next, let's say, 3 months, and parts that are more changeable, and that are the guides for sure. And let's say documentation of new features, because when it's released, you start with a, let's say, draft, and once you test it and you use the SDK, you find some things that could be changed or explained in another way. So as the general rule, this has like the main part that can change, but we will like make it more explicit somewhere in a guide of how to use the translation service and which parts are the most normal that would change in a short period of time. Okay, so let's go to the next topic, which is shared community posts. As I said at the beginning, we are like losing track of great content that it could be reused for documentation, that probably it shouldn't have to be reused, but it's great content. There are guides that someone is interested to review. We have like a strong Japanese community creating guides about Catapult that we should like keep track of them and present it somehow to other people that can find them useful. So we talked in the last meeting to find some kind of collaborative tool where the community can contribute with their own post. And right now I only know about 2 alternatives, but none of them I think it fits. Maybe we should make a call to see if someone can find some better alternative. And the reason about GitHub, it's because it's easy to contribute. We can put it there, but you cannot like search really good, or it's not like visually okay. And there will be like a lot of links, and the long term, I don't think that it's maintainable. And another one is Scrapbox. Scrapbox is a service that has like a good Papaya, I think it was. Okay, let me check. There was this service. So you see the user experience is better. You can have here like a lot of different cards. But and you can search, which I think is important. But the bad thing about it is that I would prefer like to click here and go directly to the post, and you go to a card that you have to click and go to the post. So I don't think it's like the optimal solution. So let's see if someone knows some tool that we can use to share the community post. Yeah, okay, here it's about the previous topic. So yeah, I agree. So anyone, I know that it's the first time like we talk about these tools, but I don't know if someone has like an alternative in mind that we could use to share this community post in one place that it's has a good UX, it's searchable, it's easy to contribute, and supports link, and it's public as well. It's not an internal wiki. And it's not something that we will research a little bit more.
Well, when you say searchable, like, what do you mean? What sense? Like actually being able to search the content in the links themselves, or just titles and groups by topics?
Okay, so when I say searchable, it could be like a tag cloud, for example, or a tag list that, for example, you have like accounts, multi-sig or whatever, or you can find actually here that I want to know how to, for example, run Catapult server, right? Or deploy whatever. So you can like search for content because maybe you are not interested in the first 5 guides that this website shows you, right?
Yeah. I mean, one thing I would just kind of caution on is us trying to make this too much of a thing. Because in reality, like if someone's like, how do I run a Catapult server? That's clearly a deficiency on the doc side. So like,
okay, for example,
you know,
for example, I want to know about, let's say, Mosaic usage, or I don't know, or guides about mosaics, how people is working with mosaics or with non-fungible assets. So you can search in the documentation, well, in the documentation, no, in the community website as well, information related. So it could be like a search bar, it could be like some kind of drop down that you can like actually search. But I think that it would be useful to have like some kind of blog that collects all this information in one place.
yeah. I mean, I get to be good to collect them, like a list of links and stuff. I don't really have a strong feeling other than it should be kind of simple and like having a whole, like put it this way, like using a whole nother service or something that is beyond just like standard link sharing or documentation. Like, hey, here's a list of links under a header called mosaics. And if you want to add something to mosaics, add it there or something, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I think definitely like starting simple and then kind of going up from there. Because again, I think you know, a lot of this is, you know, it almost gets too cumbersome if we're trying to catch and organize every piece of content that is about it, right? So I think some of it is just organic sharing on Twitter and other social channels, and then, you know, submitting. Again, I don't really have a strong preference other than like let's try to keep it simple versus having it be this really like go-to thing that like, hey, if you want to do something, this is where you're going to go to in order to search, in order to figure something out, versus, hey, you know, go ask on the Slack or post you know, a Stack Overflow or something, right? There was Jeff's asking a question, GitHub list of tutorials. Yeah, I mean, so to your question, Jeff, like for GitHub, you're either putting something in a repo or you can use kind of the wiki page, documentation page of GitHub. So I mean, that's definitely you know, an option. I think actually flip back over to your, David had some points there on like it's easy to collaborate but bad for searching, and you had a negative for something else. I can't remember. Go back to the slide.
Yeah, let me go back.
What was the third item? Oh, difficult to read. Yeah, I mean, like, so this is a thing where like difficult to read. In my mind, like, I would say, like, my feeling is things like searchability and reading should be, they're not dismissive, but I weight those down a lot because we shouldn't try to make this like massive database. It's like, hey, there might be 50 to 100 links over time. And then whether we put them on a static page or a Google Doc with like mosaics, accounts, or whatever, right? And then things can maybe link and wherever we put these, they can go there. And then in theory, some of these things maybe should be candidates to guides, and, so if someone posts a really great blog post as an example, it's kind of like, hey, let's convert this to a guide. And then the guide can maybe do like oh, by the way, this originally originated on this blog post, and it can just go on the bottom of it or something, right? Like, I think those are the types of things that, I want to say there's no right or wrong, but I would just say, like, if we can keep it simple as just like a list of links and little stuff, and then if it becomes problematic, then from there we can kind of go up. I definitely get, so obviously, like in your scrapbook example, I definitely get in like, Japan and stuff where it's like, hey, inherently there's an issue where like a lot of content has to be translated and shared and posted, so it kind of lives in its own bubble, so it almost needs its whole little community itself. I kind of get like what drives some of that in like a Japanese community, and so that part is important. But in theory, hopefully, that can just reflect back and kind of help us push the limits of how good can we be with keeping up on translation and sharing things that also maybe have to be translated.
Yeah. Okay, I get the point. Like, we should start small, like by gathering the links and put it, for example, in a Google Docs or in GitHub. GitHub, I think it would be better, or using the GitHub wiki, or even in the NEM documentation, put it in a section called community where you can go there and have all the relevant guides linked. That would be also a good idea. We'll think a little bit more about how to start. But I think like it's like good to not like the priority number one right now, but to, if someone, for example, encounters a tool that could be something like this, I think it would be like a good incentive to the community as well to write posts, because at the end you are giving them like some attribution. Not only they create a perfect guide that would go into the documentation, but also if they want to write maybe a short piece in their own blog, they also get the attribution, and it could be also useful because we don't lose the content. So it's just, if someone knows a tool that can solve that, maybe we could think to migrate this list to there in the future and have like a better system.
Could you please repeat this, the last part? A solution to what? To migrating the list, the linked list?
Yeah, imagine that right now we are going to have this linked list, but I want like something similar to Scrapbox. Well, I like Scrapbox.
I mean,
but, that supports link. Maybe a Scrapbox supports direct links. I don't know, but it's like quite. It's like a wiki, right? You go there, you see the links, and then you have to click. I think it would be better like to have here like the website, and you click and go directly to the blog post. I don't know if it's clear enough.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I think the purpose of the Scrapbox is a deliberate choice of not having a link to another website, because there you can put in some kind of preview and then a link to another website, maybe even a screenshot to another website. It sounds like a workaround, but I think this is on purpose in Scrapbox of not just leaving to another thing. If that would be a requirement, I mean, there are plenty of templates of having little boxes and clicking on it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so maybe you're right. Maybe Scrapbox is the final tool. Let's say if we are able like to put some kind of preview, and it's not like that. How to say that call to just click and go to another website, be redirected, so you can read a little snippet about what's the project about and then go in there. Maybe it's a good
Yeah,
solution.
or maybe
Yeah, I didn't
not
thought
an
about it.
abstract, but a short summary and that kind of stuff.
Well, it sounds good. I didn't thought about it this way, but maybe we can like give some thought. But I also agree with of what Nate has said, that maybe it's better to start small and start with a link list, and then we can test a little bit if this works or not.
And I think what would make this really work is a good URL and somehow a dev corner, dev developer corner, so corner.nemtech or something like that, dev corner.nemtech, some
Yeah,
social aspect to the dev part.
yeah, well, or like, well, community, maybe it's like too broad, but I have seen, for example, Algolia. It's the tool we are using for search, to search. For example, if you put here like them, you will see here that it's powered by Algolia. I know that, I don't know it right now, but in the past they used to have like community docs. So it was like something like docs.community.algolia.com. And it was like something like what I'm proposing here, to have a space for the community to generate docs that are not integrated with the documentation yet, but maybe can be in the future.
Cool.
And definitely, I think that Scrapbox allows to put your custom domain, so it would be somehow like quite integrated with the documentation, and there are like different templates, so we can make it a little bit similar, and with our own logo, for example.
I have some experience doing tutorials. I wrote a lot of our original tutorials and published them. I put the list in the chat box. But one thing I think that was a problem was where I published them. It was on a NIM website. It was on the NIM blog, but that was still too fractured and too off of the way that a lot of people didn't find it. So I really think that if there is a way for the community to contribute tutorials, that it should have a direct line into the main vein of NIM, whether that's on the actual Nemtech or the nemtech.github website, somewhere, some way that it's really easy for people to see. So like if we have a scrap box, that's fine. I'm okay with literally any system that allows people to contribute good and high quality tutorials. But the important thing to me is that it doesn't just end up in random places all over the internet, that there's some kind of master list that's really easy for people to find. Because
this master list, let's say, it would be like the final docs, let's say, and here you can also contribute guides. But there is people that want to like write experience or how they work with something in their own blogs. They don't want to like contribute it directly to a guide. That could be done later by contacting them or whatever. But this content in most cases is still valid, and having it somewhere like gathered, it could be like a good way to encourage people to generate content about them. If you search on for example, on Google about how Ethereum or another blockchain works, probably you won't find the documentation directly, but you will find a post of someone in Medium or in his own blog explaining about how some concept works. And this is totally fine, and we should also encourage that, not only people writing the documentation, that it could be like forcing a little bit people to do it, but also to generate content to distribute in their own blog. So I think that some kind of tool that grabs all this content is like necessary.
Yeah, I agree. But I also would like to highlight the emphasis on making whatever system it is support multiple languages, so we can get all the different languages in one place. For instance, Japan makes a lot of good tutorials. that are sometimes better than the English tutorials, but people never see them because they only get circled in the Japanese community. Likewise, there's other good tutorials in other languages that people make, Chinese or English or Russian, and that content never really ever gets shared because of that one language. So I think it would be nice, and Google Translate does a pretty good job of getting you halfway there with tutorials, but then if someone's just aware of, hey, there's a great Japanese tutorial about how to build a block explorer, then somebody who wants to do an English tutorial on how to build a block explorer doesn't have to start from scratch. At least there's a guide that's halfway done in a different language. You know?
Yes, I mean, basically what we're talking about here is related, but two different concepts, right? So like what you just brought up, Jeff, that is, let's use guides and tutorials synonymously, right? Like guides and tutorials are basically the same thing in our current world. So they are front and center. So what you just raised is the proper method and process and education of internationalizing guides. So if someone in Japan that we don't know exists writes a great guide, then we can try to encourage them to contribute it and have a process, so like, hey, here's how you contribute guides, whether it's English first or English second. So it seems like part of that's really just an education process, and then, maybe some incremental improvements on how we marshal and support guides being internationalized, right? There's internationalizing the docs as a whole, and then there's internationalizing guides that can be more kind of like incremental releases, right? So the docs might not change for weeks or months. And in those weeks or months, we can introduce 3 new guides that get translated in a couple different languages. So that's kind of highly related, but kind of a separate, translation of guides and tutorials, and then just the process of how we educate people. Hey, you've written a tutorial, you should be sharing that with the community and absorbing it back in, maybe as a guide, maybe as not a guide, right? Not all links and blog posts make sense as guides and tutorials. Whether that's 40% do or 90%, I don't know.
Okay.
So maybe we can we can add that as like a question, action item or something as like, hey, let's talk and think more about how people can, internationalize guides and how we can consume them more. I mean,
I think that's like a broader topic. Like, for example, we could start little by collecting the guides we have, like putting them in some GitHub in GitHub or in Google Docs or whatever. And then once we have like the guides, we can like say, okay, these guides are really good and we don't have this information in the documentation center. How we get them like from the author to translation and to publish on the documentation site, for example. This is like a different like topic of like how to move from there to the final docs. Yeah. So, well, I think like we have like complete like almost all the time, but there is like only one topic more, so let's do it as well. I don't know, Jeff, if you want to like share your screen or what do you prefer?
Yeah, sorry, I have another phone call coming in. There's all kinds of noise in my ears. You were talking to me, right, David?
Yeah, about we talked like yesterday, I think, about the
right.
reorganization of the homepage and some other things. So you can do like a walkthrough about what you want to change, and we can like then say like some actionable items from it. Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Okay, let me stop sharing. Okay.
Yep. You have to stop sharing. Let me come over here. Where was I at? Okay. I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So where is it at? Not that one. Okay, so here's the Nemtech GitHub. A lot of this goes into what was talking about earlier in some ways, but I just wanted to kind of figure out a way to make this all unified in a way, so that everybody could get the most out of the Nemtech GitHub website. Sometimes whenever I used it, I was a little bit confused about how things were ordered and how things were made. And then, so I put some comments in there. David, you responded, and then Paul responded. Basically, the idea was that there could be, my suggestion was there could be a landing page, and then there could be basically a page with lots of information and lots of links. And right now, I get a little bit confused. Like, for instance, with references, I come here, I click the references, and then I get this page, references. But if that's not really reference material, but if I want to find out and I click this, now I finally get to the references kind of section. I guess my thought was to, and also guides was over here. It's kind of like this. And then there's something called courses, which then leads me back up here. I guess what I was thinking is it would be really nice if just there was one big long menu over here on the left side that was very organized. That was kind of my initial thought. So that would mean taking this landing page, taking this references stuff over here, which just is done nice and beautiful and has little boxes that people can click on, and then moving it over to the landing page and combining those, and then kind of streamlining it. Paul made a mention in it, and he said, yeah, wherever Paul mentioned that he was doing something like this. And so he sent a link on this Google Doc. I went into it, wherever, Business Labs. It's 32 pages long, so I'm not exactly sure what he's talking about, but I think that this is probably what he's talking about here. This part where he calls it the framework website. And it looks like the landing pages concept is similar. And then he has a main page with a menu item, showcases and solutions menu item, developer center with a menu item, start developing. When I look at this, me personally, I still, maybe I'm old school because this is how I grew up on them, but I grew up on this, which was a terrible navigation system. I'm sure you guys have all seen that. It was a terrible navigation system, but it was still very nice because I always knew that there was exactly one place I could go and get all the information. Whereas having navigation links on the left side would have been way, way, way better. And then now we have, this is a way better website, way better concept. And I like the fact that everybody can contribute. I think that we're definitely on the right path. I was just making some suggestions. When I look at Paul's suggestions here, we don't really have anything right now for showcases. And if we did have really good showcase material, I think it would be good idea to put it in the landing page and highlight it. But then most of what's in main page, most of what's in developer center, and most of what's in start developing, to me, could just all go in one big long list. So that's my thoughts. These are just soft suggestions. It's not a hard suggestion. I'd like to get feedback on what other people might think.
Well, I would like to add to the business proposal plan. So, well, there is one example in the appendix that you have been showing, but if you navigate back to the document and you go up, then...
I'm sorry, where do I go?
Well, in the business proposal that you have been showing.
Oh, for NIM Labs? Yeah.
Exactly. So this is just some extra information, but if you go up, I think it was like on page 5 or 6, where there's a funnel.
It's 33 pages, so I didn't get to see it all. I needed
so wait. So this is one of the things. Basically harmonizing a nice landing page plus a technical page, where currently we start with features and then people don't even find the solutions. You have been also just mentioning that there are no solutions that the people are really referring to. But if you go to Nem.io, you will see some scattered solutions to problems or problem statements. But if you go down in the very same document.
Okay.
Okay, maybe I can try like to summarize like everything. Okay, so basically what the Catapult framework proposes is to create also like all the funnel, not only for developers, but also different actors that should reach them and to understand it in a different level. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the Nem Developer Center, it's only like one, let's say, section of the page. It could be similar to nem.io/developers. That this is like the current Developer Center, but it would be this website, the website we are preparing will like substitute the another one. And there is like there should be like also a NEM general website. That is what I think the NEM Catapult framework is suggesting, as well as other sub-landing pages that should be created for different entities. So don't think as the NEM Developer Center as the next NEM website, because it won't be. It would be like the main place for developers, but for other stakeholders, there would be like other landing pages with other different kind of content. For example, for education, maybe there should be another one. For investors, another one. For people that is just looking through the technology, if it fits for their business, it would be another one. So going back again to the topic that was like make the NEM Developer Center better. I think that definitely we should like have like a new landing page that it's totally right. So I shared here a GitHub issue where anyone that has an idea, like a requirement of how this new landing for developers, having this in mind, has some requirement or idea, they can like post it here in this issue, right? So we will start gathering requirements. And once we have like more or less an idea, we will do a mock-up. We will try among the people that contribute to this process to find as well a designer. And when we have like all this quite set, then we will implement it and actually merge these concepts, right? So let's start like gathering specific requirements. One could be like move the reference page, but also like to have a section in the landing page, calling to, for example, to give more visibility to the social networks, for example, right? So we can also provide examples of pages that you like, other developer centers, so we can like get inspiration, then design, and then implement the changes. And another thing regarding the navigation, I have been thinking about it. Right now we are following an approach that is separate because of some reasons, but I see your point right now when you have like been navigating through the pages, and maybe we should also include guides somehow back again there. But I don't feel that the complete list of the drop down should be in the main navigation, because I prefer when people are doing guides to focus on the guide and not in other content. So I don't know, we will think a little bit more and see if it's feasible to do this navigation change. The ones to merge guides and the sidebar that maybe could be possible, but I have read like some other things as well in the post, like deleting the getting started section, merging it with another section, and I didn't like this proposed change.
Yeah, I guess to me, the problem I'm trying to solve is, as a new person coming in and looking at the website, I get lost pretty easily. And I understand the idea to silo different things and to to make them into different parts. But there's actually a lot of information that I don't discover until someone sends me a link to, because the overarching like layout had me confused. So I kind of wanted something, and sometimes I see something and then I know it's really good, but then I try to go back later on and I can't find it. Because I don't know where it went, right? And I'm a high level kind of expert user who visits the website a lot, and I get confused. So I imagine that other people that are less than me are getting confused there too. I guess this is the kind of problem that I'm trying to solve.
So
and I don't care how we solve it. I just want to make it sure that everybody gets access to the information easily.
Okay, as a call to action, let's like put the requirements we want, like better navigation, the list of topics in the GitHub issue, so we can discuss them a little bit more. And eventually we will come with a mock-up and a new way of of navigating the website and having a new landing page more attractive, for example. But what is important here as well is that we get feedback from developers, that at the end it's like our target group, and this would be like the people who will be navigating the documentation and probably have navigated through a lot of documentation before, and they can actually tell if our documentation is right or we have to improve X, Y, Z when they're using and when they try to implement something. So we should like try to get not only documentation related people, but also actual developers that are building products in them. For example, Jeff in Lagstack, probably there are like some people playing with the dogs, and maybe they have some ideas and they can actually provide some value. Also the people in Proxima X coding, they can actually say what they like, they don't like about the documentation. And with all this feedback from the final target that are developers, we can actually have like the best result. Because at the end of the day, it's these people who will use the docs.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great idea. We should definitely put together a team of people that are fairly new to NIM and let them on the website and get feedback.
Yeah. Yeah.
If they're happy, I'm happy. That's all I want. So that's it for me. That was my suggestion. So I just wanted to bring that up. I'm good here. And actually, I have another phone call that I'm late for, so I'm going to go ahead and drop out, and I'll catch you guys later.
Okay. Well, I think we are finishing as well. If anyone has another topic to share.
Not from my side.
Okay. So I think that's like all for today. Thanks for joining the call. Maybe I think it's okay. So see you in the next meeting that will be probably the next month, or maybe at the end of this month. It will depend.
See everyone online.
Okay, see you. Bye.